Hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. I'm Jake. On this episode, we're going to do a modernized G.A. Henty story. Now, it's only slightly modernized. It's not crazy modernized. I recorded this for the Relearn App, Relearn.org. It's full of family-friendly audio dramas, audio books, that kind of thing. And you can get if you can do a free trial. There's a coupon code in the bottom, in the show notes. I don't get a nickel out of this. It's 20% off to you. So you get all the gravy, you know what I'm saying? So I just like the guy, Dale Partridge, a friend of mine. And I want to help him out. I want to push people toward him. And if you like listening to stuff, family-friendly type of things, from classic literature and that sort of thing, you'd like to check it out. So definitely do that. But here in its entirety is the short story Hunted by Wolves by G.A. Henty. Now, if you listen on the Relearn app, it's going to be soundscaped. So Dale and his team, they put wind sounds and wolves howling and fire crackling, and it's a little more intense, and I love that. But here is just audiobook style. This is just the voice. So anyway, without any further ado. Hunted by Wolves. One Man's Fight in the Spanish Mountains by G.A. Henty. Updated and produced by Relearn.org. Audio production and copyright by Relearn.org in 2025. Read by Jake Phillips. The year was 247 BC in North Africa. Martin, a young officer in the guard of the renowned Carthaginian general Hannibal, set out with two companions on a hunting expedition in the mountains of Spain. After a full day of sport, they were unable to locate their camp and decided to spend the night in the woods. There was still a few patches of snow on the ground from a recent storm, but the temperature was rising. After their meal and some conversation, Henry and the other companion lay down to rest, while Martin offered to take the first watch. For a while he sat quietly, now and then tossing more logs onto the fire from the pile they had gathered earlier, but before long his posture shifted. He leaned forward, listening carefully, then stood up. Earlier he had caught the distant howls of lone wolves roaming the forest, but now he heard something different, a long, deep, continuous howling. He listened for a minute or two more, then woke the others. "A large pack of wolves is closing in," Martin said. "From the sound of it, I think they've caught our scent. That's the path we came down from the ridge, and it sounds like they're climbing the opposite slope now." "Yes, and judging by the noise, there must be a great number of them," Henry replied. "Build up the fire and start gathering more wood as fast as you can. When they come in large packs, these beasts can be truly dangerous, and they hate fire." The three men got to work at once, cutting down brushwood and hacking off low branches with their swords. "Let's split the fire into 4, Henry instructed, "and pile the rest of the wood in the middle. They'll be unlikely to pass between the flames." The howling grew louder as the pack began descending the far slope, their cries now a wild mix of howls and sharp yelps that sent a chill down Martin's spine. But just as they neared the camp, the howling stopped, all at once. "They've spotted us," Henry said. "Stay alert and don't waste a single shot. We'll need every arrow before morning." The men stood perfectly still, listening. They could hear the soft patter of wolves' paws on the dry leaves, but with the moon now set, the animals were hidden in the darkness. "I think I can see little sparks flickering in the bushes," Martin whispered. "It's the firelight reflecting in their eyes," Henry replied. "Look, they've surrounded us. There must be dozens of them." For a while the wolves held back, circling silently just beyond the light. Then, emboldened by the group's stillness, 2 or 3 gray shapes crept into the edge of the firelight. 3 bowstrings snapped in quick succession. 2 wolves dropped instantly, and the third let out a sharp cry and bolted into the shadows. A flurry of snarls and growls followed, then a yelp of pain, a furious struggle, and a long guttural snarling that echoed through the trees. "What are they doing?" Martin asked, trembling. "I think they're eating their fallen companion," Henry answered. "I've heard this is a practice among these barbaric creatures. Look, the bodies of the other two are already gone." This act revealed the wolves' desperate hunger and their eerily quiet movements, prompting the group to heighten their watchfulness. Martin tossed a handful of branches onto each fire. "We must ration the wood," Henry cautioned. "I wish we'd considered this before settling down to rest. Had we gathered enough fuel for the fires, we'd be secure, but I fear our supply won't hold until sunrise." As the night wore on, the wolves grew bolder, their demeanor increasingly menacing. In tight packs, they edged closer to the fires. Each time they advanced, the group hurled armfuls of wood onto the flames. As the fires blazed brightly, the wolves retreated, losing a few of their number to the arrows of the men. But the woodpile was dwindling rapidly, and unless the wolves pressed forward, the group had to let the fires burn low. "It's still about 4 hours until daylight," Henry said, tossing the last piece of wood onto the fire. "As the flames flare up, look around and see if you can spot a tree we could climb. I wish we'd taken to the trees from the start instead of relying on our fires." Unfortunately, they had chosen a relatively open path of ground for their camp, as the underbrush grew dense among the trees. "There's a tree over there," Martin said, pointing, "with a branch only 6 feet from the ground. One leap to that and we'll be safe." "Very well," Henry agreed. "Let's make for it now, before the fire dies down. Sheathe your swords, sling your bows and arrows over your shoulders, and each of you grab a burning branch. These will serve us better than swords or spears in this situation. Are you ready?" The men got themselves prepared to run while holding torches in their hands. "Now!" Carrying the burning branches above their heads, the 3 men sprinted toward the tree. It was as if the wolves sensed their prey's attempt to flee. With a ferocious howl, they burst from the undergrowth and charged to intercept them, undeterred by the flaming branches. Martin barely registered the chaos of the brief, savage clash. One wolf lunged at his shield, nearly knocking him down, but the shield's sharp center pierced its body and he threw it off, simultaneously thrusting his burning branch into the face of another. A third wolf clamped onto his shoulder, its hot breath grazing his face. Dropping the branch, Martin plunged his dagger deep into the wolf's side. Then, heaving his heavy shield into the pack of wolves before him, he leaped into their midst, seized the branch, and swung himself into the tree, pulling his legs up as a dozen wolves snapped at him with gaping jaws. He let out a cry of horror. His 2 companions had fallen, and only an angry tangle of bodies marked where they lay. For a moment he wavered, torn between jumping down to help them or staying put. But one look below confirmed he'd be overwhelmed by wolves long before he could help them. Sliding along the branch until he reached the trunk, Martin stood and fired his arrows fiercely into the pack of wolves below, stopping only when he had just 3 or 4 arrows remaining. These he saved for a final stand. Chapter 2. With nothing left to do, Martin sank onto the branch and wept over the death of his companions. When he looked up, all was still. The savage pack had consumed not only his friends, but their own fallen wolves, and now they sat in a circle, tongues lolling, eyes fixed on him. As the fire's glow faded, their forms vanished into the dark, but their sharp, rapid breaths told him they were still watching. Martin climbed higher until he found a fork in the tree where he could rest comfortably, and there he waited for dawn, hoping his enemies would retreat. But as the gray light broke, he saw them still lurking below. Even as day fully emerged, they showed no signs of leaving. Realizing they had no intention of abandoning their potential prey, Martin began to weigh his options. For all he knew, he could be miles from camp, and his fellow soldiers there would have no way of knowing his situation. They would surely send out soldiers to search for the group, but in the tangled expanse of forest and mountain, it was a slim chance they would stumble upon the spot where he was trapped. Still, it appeared to him that this was the only possibility of his rescue. The trees grew thickly together, and he could easily have climbed from one tree to another, but the wolves were watching him, so there was no advantage in shifting his position. The day passed slowly. Most of the wolves had retreated from the base of the tree, but a few remained, holding their ground with unwavering focus. Martin knew the others were lurking nearby in the underbrush. their frequent growls reaching his ears. Occasionally, a gray head poked out, its bloodthirsty eyes fixed on him. Every so often, Martin strained to hear any hint of his companion's distant calls, holding his breath in hope. But the forest remained silent, and he was certain the wolves' keen senses would detect anyone approaching before he could. Once or twice he noticed the wolves' ears perk up, their bodies tensing as if catching some sound beyond his hearing. Yet the moment passed quickly, and he wondered if they were merely tracking the faint steps of a deer moving through the forest. Night fell once more, bringing its long, grim hours. Martin secured himself to the tree with his belt to avoid slipping off. He managed a few hours of fitful sleep, jerking awake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced he was plummeting into the ravenous jaws below. By morning, a fierce urge to strike back at his enemies gripped him, and he climbed down to the lowest branch. The wolves, sensing their prey within reach, gathered densely beneath, leaping towards him with snapping jaws. Martin lay flat on the branch, locking his legs tightly around it for leverage, and drove his sword deep into the throat of a wolf that sprang within inches of him. Several died this way, and the others, growing wary, retreated a short distance. Then an idea sparked in Martin's mind. He unfastened his belt, making it a running noose that would choke the wolves, and waited for them to muster the courage to attack again. It didn't take long. Driven by a hunger only sharpened by the prey they'd already consumed, the wolves surged forward once more, leaping toward the branch. Martin slipped the noose over the neck of a wolf and with a strained effort hoisted it to the branch, killing it swiftly with his dagger. He then shifted along the branch, hanging the body on a limb some 10 feet off the ground, and slashed open its chest and belly with his blade. This done, he returned to his perch. One by one, 6 wolves were pulled up and killed, and as Martin had anticipated, the scent of their blood drove the pack into a frenzy. They swarmed at the tree's base, leaping at the trunk in futile attempts to reach the tantalizing prey dangling just beyond their grasp. The day crept by as before, with no sign of rescue. As night descended, Martin lowered himself to the lowest branch and fired his 3 remaining arrows into the wolves below. Each struck and killed, causing shrill howls and the clamor of a frenzied struggle in the darkness. He then pushed the 6 slain wolves from their perch to the ground below, and as silently as he could, he edged along a branch into a neighboring tree. From there he moved to another, and then another, until he was well away from the spot where the wolves, consumed by their snarling fight over the bodies of the dead wolves, paid no attention to him. Then Martin dropped silently to the ground and ran as fast as he could. He was certain it would take the wolves some time to finish their feast, and even if they noticed his absence from the tree, it would likely be a while before they could pick up his trail, especially since their senses would be dulled by the blood they'd just consumed. He paused several times, listening in fear for the distant howl that would signal the pack had caught his scent again. But all remained quiet, except for the usual forest sounds. Within 2 hours, he spotted the faint glow of light in the distance, and soon reached the safety of his friend's camp. Exhausted but relieved, Martin stumbled into the camp's warm glow, falling to his knees and offering a fervent prayer of thanksgiving to God for his deliverance from the jaws of the wolves. His comrades, overjoyed at his return, gathered around as he recounted the harrowing ordeal, his desperate stand in the tree, the cunning escape, and the relentless pack that had pursued him. Fueled by a mix of vengeance and duty to protect the camp, Martin, after a brief rest and some food and water, rallied a group of men, armed themselves with bows and spears, and set out into the forest to hunt down the remaining wolves, determined to end their threat once and for all. Thank you for listening to Hunted by Wolves, One Man's Fight in the Spanish Mountains. To listen to other Christian audiobooks for the entire family, visit Relearn.org or download the Relearn App.